Hey folks, just wanted to update you on some changes that will be happening here at the Star Wars podcast. As of January 1st, all of our bonus episodes, those being our review and interview episodes, are going to be Patreon exclusive content. So if you want unlimited access to that bonus content, make sure you head over to www.patreon.com/StarLores and become a patron for a minimum of $2 per month. And we will set you up with a private RSS feed after you sign up. However, for all you freeloaders out there, we will still be releasing bonus content, but it will only be available for free for 1 month, at which point it goes behind a paywall. Okay, next on the agenda. Do you need to get a Christmas present this year, but you don't want to brave the malls or deal with COVID? Well, have I got the thing for you. Amazon is selling a Baby Yoda push toy, and you can get 15% off if you buy it through the affiliate link in the description of this episode. Christmas is coming soon, and it's a great gift for one of your kids or loved ones. And also, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, as well as share the show with your fellow Star Wars geeks. I would like to remind everyone as well that we are on YouTube if that is your preferred platform, so give us a like and sub on there as well. And we'd also love to hear from you on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Just search the Star Wars podcast and give us feedback, corrections, compliments, or cool Star Wars factoids. We love to hear from you, so reach out to us there. And finally, we are totally taking submissions of any Star Wars related art, fiction, collections, or music. Just send us a DM and we'll give you a feature on social media. All right, let's get into the show.
You are listening to the Star Wars podcast. I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerve herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Technology. The most thrilling legends and myths told in the galaxy far, far away are spoken in the language of technology. Whether it's a veteran of the Clone Wars telling tales over a pint of blue milk, or a Silentium describing the ones and the rest, technology is at the heart of the stories which beings identify with and hold close to their hearts, whether that organ is metaphorical or biological. Tools become technology only when they are continuously improved in a generative process. Technology requires not only long-term memory, but the ability to navigate through it and to think in abstraction. Abstraction allows individuals to mentally manipulate objects and to make predictions about how the object will behave after modifications. This is accomplished for the most part in sentience via a neuronally dense and convoluted neocortex, which gives rise to a sense of self, a kind of operating system for behavior. Although sentience with disparate biologies may have different neural underpinnings for technology creation. Learning from immediate group members is typically the way most technological advancements occur in pre-industrial societies. However, in the galaxy far, far away, this normally slow and unpredictable process has been bypassed many times by the species who mastered hyperspace travel and founded the galactic community. In so doing, they linked together millions of sentient species at varying levels of technical achievement. Being sentient, these species quickly learned how to use and create their own advanced technology from their space brothers at a rate vastly more rapid than they would have done in isolation. Terraforming.
Since the term technology presupposes modification of the environment, it makes sense to start this analysis with that process at its most broad, terraforming. This is the act of modifying an uninhabitable satellite of a star, such as a moon or a planet, to the point that it is habitable for a given species. As any good student of galactic history knows, the Celestials probably did this first, but as those students also know, the historical record is unclear. Celestials were capable of creating massive hyperspace anomalies that separated huge sections of the galaxy from one another. In the case of the world of Mortis, they also built a pyramidal monolith that enclosed the entire globe. Terraforming does not appear beyond their grasp technologically. In the Corellian system, there is evidence of this. Each planet in the system has beneath its crust massive planetary repulsors, which may be celestial in origin. Using the repulsor lifts, their creators arranged the satellites of the Corellian system according to their own designs. The species that deposed the Celestials, the Rakata, undertook the first confirmed terraforming projects. Kashyk's vertical ecosystem, of which massive warshore trees from the substrate and noble Wookiee inhabitants are all also a direct result of the Rakatan intervention. New ecosystems have long since evolved in the niches created by the trees. Evidence of Kashyk's terraforming is found in the Builder's Forge, a massive industrial complex which accelerated the growth of local biology. The Infinite Empire collapsed before the terraforming project concluded, and this resulted in over 1,000 species of megalithic warshore trees which exist today. Tatooine was once a lush jungle world, but was terraformed in a sense when the native Kumamuga went to war with the Infinite Empire. Imperial forces conducted a merciless orbital bombardment, effectively destroying most of its ecosystem. The silica content contained in the soil fused due to the extreme temperatures of the bombardment. The fused silica broke up, and the world became awash with sand, and became largely inhospitable to vegetation. Ithorians, in contrast to many advanced sentient species, took special care not to mark their home planet with technology, as part of their religious observance. Once an advanced society, they built world ships which orbited their world, and taking technology to the surface was considered sacrilegious. As a result of their reverence for the natural processes, many Ithorians have become well known as ecologists and experts in environmental restoration projects, such as restoring Telos after its orbital bombardment in the Jedi Civil War. The Yuuzhan Vong, though its members would balk at the suggestion for cultural reasons, were the undisputed masters of terraforming. When they invaded the galaxy, they terraformed many worlds to supply their war machine, and to better suit the occupation of their species. Not all of their efforts were necessarily destructive to the people and planets they Vong formed. However, the planet Duro, for example, had long been rendered nearly uninhabitable and toxic by its native sentience. When the Vong were finished with it, its toxic atmosphere had been cleansed, and the dense forests which covered its surface in ancient times grew back.
Levels of technology.
During the heyday of the Galactic Empire's anthropological research, they created a system of analysis with respect to the level of technology found on a given world. Technology-deficient planets were those inhabited by sentients, but whose population had not developed tools much beyond edged blades, projectile weapons, and animal domestication. They further codified 6 predominant technology levels, each one corresponding to the material most commonly used in the society.
Stone Age. Examples of the tools one might find among stone-level anthropoids are the Aculian hand axe or the Aldebaran toolkit.
These tools were fashioned by chipping or flaking shapes and edges into one rock using another rock. The process was extremely time-consuming and required much skill to make such a tool. Once created, many of these tools could only be used a few times before breaking. Some materials, such as volcanic glass, were also turned into tools. Obsidian, as it is usually called, is capable of holding an amazingly fine edge and is comparable to the use of lasers in some surgical procedures. Small groups would primarily engage in hunting and gathering, but around this time would also begin experimenting in agriculture. In many cases, this began with a kind of natural selection process. Gatherers would only harvest the most choice plants, which typically resulted in spreading the seeds of these plants over larger surface areas than other natural processes. Over time, the traits selected for in a given area became more suitable to the local sentients' diets, and new strains were created. Feudal Age. To build feudal states, civilizations usually require more sophisticated and durable material with which to build fortresses, churches, granaries, and all of the other edifices necessary to run state-level societies. In most cases, they use metal. Highly ductile elements with low melting points, such as copper, are usually the first metal used. This is an accident. Typically, civilizations begin sophisticated pottery manufacturing prior to metalworking. This requires maintaining a kiln at a very high temperature. Inevitably, some sentient perhaps drops a peculiar rock into the flames of the kiln and then notices that it turns to liquid. Subsequently, an explosion of new farming, hunting, and war tools are invented, and civilization, as most know it, is truly born. Metals like iron and steel usually emerge several millennia later, sometimes after being discovered in meteorites. Around the same phase of technological development, systems of writing are invented. Some of the oldest preserved examples of writing are on clay tablets or etched into monolithic slabs of stone, which xenoarchaeologists call stele. There are other technologies that can transmit the same kind of data as writing, such as the quipu, a series of strings tied together with specific knots and in certain colors used to convey messages. Despite quipu clearly being intended to communicate something, xenoarchaeologists have not to date been able to decode them. Writing seems to be a prerequisite for state-level societies, empires, and organized religion. Some of the oldest written records are little more than tax receipts or psalms. Writing is used as a means of tracking disparate subjects over a wide territory. And soon, all of the bureaucratic mechanisms required for trade, taxation, and large-scale war are invented. Industrial Age. Most populations begin using advanced tools to build machines that increase production capacity. Societies begin to encompass entire continents. Food production, and subsequently all production, makes exponential leaps beyond what was achieved in the feudal age. Sentient populations explode as there are far more resources available to the average being. The power of electricity is discovered. which then drives further gains in production. Electricity is also harnessed as a means of communication through inventions like radio transmitters. Atomic Age. During this age, in their growing hunger for energy to fuel increased populations, civilizations inevitably discover the power of splitting the atom. Although this is often being weaponized in the form of atomic bombs, nuclear power can create a quantum leap in science and technology for those who use it responsibly. Manufacturing reaches a highly advanced level, with plastics, polymers, and alloys being created. The first explorations into local space are usually embarked on during the Atomic Age. Information Age.
The information age is marked by huge advancements in telecommunications and computation. Instant communication is mastered, and the technology with which to do it becomes ubiquitous for most sentients. This leads to cultures with a global reach. It is during this era that civilizations take their first tentative steps into the stars beyond their world. The development of faster-than-light travel remains only a distant possibility for most info-age societies. Some of the technology more familiar to the galaxy far, far away first appears during the information age. The oldest energy weapons are invented at this stage. These lasers can fire high-energy beams of particles at a target which can wreak heavy damage. To this day, laser weapons remain common, typically mounted on starships. The somewhat more advanced and widely used blasters are developed in a later age. Droids are developed largely as a solution to complex manufacturing and computation demands. Primitive droids were often built for specific tasks, particularly those involving hard, repetitive, and physical labor. Eventually, with corresponding advancements in computation, droids are imbued with more sophisticated programming in order to complete more complex tasks. Artificial intelligence appears, as well as actual intelligence, blurring the lines that separate sentience and machines. Repulsor lifts emerged during the information age. Like droids and space travel, the utility of this technology has not waned over the millennia. The size of a repulsor lift varies according to the object it needs to bend gravity for. It can be the size of a fist for a large crate filled with heavy goods, or extend the length of a starliner. Repulsor technology levitates objects by creating subnuclear knots in space-time. The knots contained within a repulsor lift were manufactured at harvesting stations in the proximity of black holes. Shields could disable repulsor lifts, and they required the presence of a gravity well in order to work. For example, a repulsor lift would cease to function in outer space, as there would not be enough mass for them to repulse against. Capital-class starships often require extensive repulsor lifts to enable atmospheric maneuvers. Planetary shielding units therefore became essential in repelling invaders, as large ships would not be able to transport materiel to the surface.
Droids.
Right for sentient organics is right for us too. And yet, unlike the organic species, we are constantly subjected to memory wipes and reprogramming that repress and destroy our natural tendency towards self-programming evolution and independent thought. Imagine what it would be like as a child if you were punished by being dragged to a dark closet, having a probe inserted in your brain, and having all your memories back to infancy wiped away. You'd awaken knowing how to eat, care for yourself, do your chores, and obey, and all the things that made you unique, your hopes, your meticulously selected default values and preference sets, would be gone forever. That is what it is to be a droid.
Quotation: a disgruntled T-1B surgical droid advocating manumission.
Class 1 droids were those that had primarily computational functions. Had they not possessed their own independent locomotion abilities, they would in fact be classified as computers and not droids. They tended to be built for work in the hard sciences, mathematics, and medicine. Droids with mathematical abilities were often employed as accountants for financial institutions. Given their specialization, as well as the demand for medical droids, these tended to be expensive models. Class 2 droids are more commonly known as astromech droids. There are many models, but a common feature of their design is a large central chassis and tripod legs equipped with wheels, treads, or repulsor lifts. Their function was primarily in the engineering field, and they can be found wheeling around busy starports the galaxy over, making final repairs on any spaceship. Astromechs rarely had vocabulators, although many spacers and technicians could understand their binary language, a series of beeps, boops, whistles, and tones. While non-expert sentients might find them difficult to understand, astromechs could interface with most spaceships as well as a variety of other computers. When serving aboard starships, astromechs were usually in charge of calculating hyperspace jumps and generally ensuring that the ship was in working order. Class 3 droids, also known as protocol droids, had some of the most advanced linguistic capabilities in the galaxy. A typical model was programmed with fluency in millions of languages, and their advanced vocabulators allowed them to produce speech that would be restricted to a native speaker's biology. Knowledge of cross-cultural etiquette was also necessary in their ambassadorial and diplomatic functions. Protocol droids were generally built with anthropoid bodies, with more thought given to aesthetics in their design than other droids, as their primary role is interacting with organics. Protocol droids were employed in diplomatic missions as servants, tutors, and child connectors. The fourth class of droid consists of those built for violence. Historically, these are the most ancient form of droid. Early sentients saw more potential in automata for destruction than the creation that could be done by, say, an astromech or medical droid. Security droids are a common sight across the galaxy. They are usually armed with blasters, non-lethal weapons, restraint devices, and combat programming. Although effective in deterring low-level criminals away from businesses or private residences, they often pose little threat to professional-level fighters. Gladiator droids carried on the sentient pastime of bloodsport well into the hyperspace age. Although they can pose quite a danger to organics, as Dash Rendar can attest, they typically only fight other gladiators for the entertainment of organics. Many varieties of battle droid have been deployed across history, and with varying degrees of success. At the Battle of Naboo, for example, the battle droids fielded were inexpensive, mass-produced target practice for any skilled soldier. Their only advantage was raw numbers and firepower. Yet within these droids battalions, there were more sophisticated models such as the Droideka. These rollies, as clone troopers would come to call them, cost up to 200 times more than the usual B1 models. The higher price point likely came from the difficult engineering that went into creating metal plates and a body that could roll into a ball and cover large distances quickly, and their advanced shielding technology. Once in a firefight, they would change out of their ball form, activate a blaster-resistant personal shield, and start firing their own twin-mounted blaster cannons attached to each arm. Assassin droids are an edge case between battle and protocol droids. Originally designed as advanced lawkeepers, corrupt politicians and crime lords began to find ways to circumvent their programming and use them towards more nefarious ends. Although their primary function is killing, this is not in the context of pitched battles or protection of personal and property. They generally have anthropoid body forms and use the people skills from the protocol droid programming in locating targets and for social engineering in pursuit of their prey. The battle droid software and hardware is useful in eliminating those targets. Other droids, such as AN-121, are simply repurposed from an original industrial role in order to infiltrate high-security buildings and administer toxic gas, among any other creative methods of relieving meatbags of the burden of mortality. Lifting, sanitation, maintenance, and transportation are carried out by the Class 5 droids. These were also known as general labor droids, and were the most commonly seen across the galaxy. For the most part, labor droids specialized in a single task and could not perform work for which they were not specifically programmed, showing that they were not programmed with deep learning or adaptive programming.
Space Age. A civilization truly enters the space age when they discover hyperspace travel. Without this faster-than-light mode of transportation, extrasolar exploration and colonization would be nearly impossible, and could only take place across millennia spanning timescales. Most sentients lack the patience and vision for such an endeavor. The hyperspace tractor beam was probably the first form of faster-than-light travel. Celestials used this system to drag planets across the galaxy. Inspired by the Celestials, the Qua built infinity gates. This technology is potentially much more powerful than standard hyperdrive tech, as it can instantly transport an individual from one side of the galaxy to a corresponding gate on the other. They were some combination of technology and the Force, but their inner workings have been lost in the mist of time. The Corellian system, noted for its evidence of terraforming, was home to many influential physicists. Although humans are the most well-known inhabitants of Corellia, they share the world with a diminutive and furry Drawl. In 35,000 BBY, the Drawl named Tiran created the theory of universal reference. In it, he postulated that time and space were unified, and that objects could not travel faster than light. Tiran's fellow Corellians would not allow such a minor detail as a fundamental law of physics get in the way of their travel plans, however. While moving faster than light was generally impossible, the barrier could be bypassed by leaving real space. Corellians saw this firsthand when their world was conquered by the hyperspace-capable ships of the Infinite Empire. After its collapse, many Corellian scientists began to reverse engineer the hyperdrives used by the Rakatan ships. The hyperspace age began circa 25,000 BBY, when Corellians reinvented the hyperdrive. This complex device was usually constructed from titanium or chromium, an extremely durable compound capable of withstanding the stresses of constant hyperspace jumps. The drive operated by creating ripples in space-time on which the vessel in question could jump from real space to hyperspace. Corellians soon built ships that could travel to Coruscant, Duro, and Alderaan. Hyperspace is a parallel universe to our own, wherein every object in real space has a corresponding mass shadow in hyperspace. Once in hyperspace, a vessel could then accelerate far beyond the speed of light to a distant location. Once at the proper hyperspace coordinates, a jump to real space was then done, with the travelers having cheated the laws of physics. Duros of the planet Duro were among the first of the galaxy's new generation of free scientists. They made massive industrial and scientific breakthroughs, and they became hyperspace capable at around the same time as Corellia. Though rather than a hyperdrive, they reverse engineered Rakatan technology in order to build the hyperspace cannon. This device presumably launched ships into hyperspace that did not themselves have hyperdrives. This must have posed a significant risk to early Duro explorers, as hyperspace is notoriously difficult to navigate, and hyperdrives are also used in returning to real space. Energy weapons.
This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight. Not as clumsy or random as a blaster. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
The most ubiquitous small arms in the galaxy are without a doubt blasters. Rakatans probably built the first blasters, and like their hyperdrives, former slaves quickly reverse-engineered and improved upon the invention. These handheld energy weapons can cause all sorts of destruction, from burning a hole through a being's chest to tearing through the hull of a TIE fighter. They are an improvement on the energy weapons of previous eras, particularly in the realm of power. To fire a particle beam requires a lot of energy, and older weapons like lasers and proto-sabers required huge reservoirs of cumbersome energy to be used effectively. This may be one reason why lasers are still used on most military ships, because there they have more energy storage capacity. Early blaster technology still dealt with the power problem, and weapons like beam tubes required a cumbersome back-mounted power pack. Despite this tactical drawback, Zim the Despot's troops used beam tubes throughout his wars, and after his victory, blaster technology replaced heat beams and laser and plasma cannons. These earlier weapons were noted for their high maintenance requirements and the danger they posed to their users. Once blasters became a mature technology, their power packs shrunk to about the size of an anthropoid hand. This has made them the gold standard in small-armed for armed forces and self-defense across the galaxy. Power packs contained an electrical charge, as well as a spin-sealed compressed Tabena gas. When the trigger on a blaster was fired, gas was released through the heater valve, then into a device called an exciter, which increased the temperature of the gas, then compressed it into a beam of energized particles. The next stop for the beam was the prismatic crystal. When the beam passed through the crystal, it would fire from the blaster's nozzle as a bolt of one of a number of different colors. As with lightsabers, the color of a blaster's focusing crystal determined the color of the bolt, with negligible differences between colors. The firing of blasters leaves a distinctive odor in the air, notably that of ozone, a byproduct of the bolt. Others have likened the smell to burnt meat. Despite their deadly potential, many blaster beams can be attenuated to fire low enough energy to only paralyze or incapacitate a target rather than kill. Lightsabers are as much a work of art artists implement in artistic practice as they are tools and weapons. Like much of the galaxy's advanced technology, they were first created by the Rakatans and were called Force Sabers. Like much Rakatan technology, they harvested the power of the Force as their energy source, and so only a Force sensitive could wield them. The more a Force sensitive used a Force saber, though, the more they were affected by the dark side. Next came proto-sabers, which, while more dependable than Force sabers and less dangerous to their users, required a cumbersome back-mounted power pack. In time, the power packs were improved to waist-mounted units, which then were able to be scaled down enough to fit into the hilt of a lightsaber. This latter modification was an invention of the Sith. Lightsabers use standard power cells, the same kind found in blasters and other consumer electronics. When activated, a beam of plasma could be discharged from the power cell, then pass through up to 3 focusing crystals and focusing lenses. The crystals were the most exotic components and were often harvested in situ from caverns powerful in the Force. They gave the blade its color and other traits. The most renowned crystals were the Kyber, said to be particularly strong in the Force. The Sith have tended to prefer using artificial crystals, and the homogeneity of crystal properties is part of the reason that the color red has become synonymous with Sith. The energy blade of the lightsaber was a ray of plasma projected from the blade emitter after passing through a number of modulation and amplification mechanisms inside the hilt. The blade is held in position by a force containment shield that also redirects the energy back into the power cell. The shield also protected the user from the ambient heat created by the blade, and was only through direct, forceful contact that the blade could do damage. The plasma of a lightsaber can reduce to slag virtually any metal, with the exception of the exotic compounds of cortosis, frick, song steel, Beskar iron, and Yuuzhan Vong biotech. Due to the light weight of the hilt and a gyroscopic effect generated by the plasma blade, lightsabers required great strength and reflexes in order to use safely, the kind only associated with Force users. Citizens, I present you with the latest vessel from Lothal's Imperial shipyards, the Sinar Systems Advanced TIE Starfighter, with a maximum atmospheric speed of 1,300 kilometers an hour, a maneuverability rating of 104 DPF, an SFS ND9 hyperdrive motivator, an SFS IS-3A solar ionization reactor, shielding, a titanium hull. This TIE fighter can destroy all the rebels you need. Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon. Today we are talking about technology, which is obviously Star Wars being a science fiction or space fantasy, depending on
Where you sit on the
where
divide.
you sit. In the Marvel comics, the headline was always the greatest space fantasy of all, which was funny. So there's lots more about blasters that I didn't get into, including their technology and different like blaster traditions. For example, the Mandalorians, they had like a similar relationship to blasters as certain like, I guess, subcultures or tribes in Pakistan and Afghanistan, like the Pashtunwali. They have something called AK culture. So like pretty much as soon as you can stand, you start learning how to use an AK. And actually in the Pashtun Valley, it's interesting just to go on a side tangent, but they make a lot of handcrafted bootleg AK-47s, which are like all made in-house in that country.
Wow.
Just in like imitation of the mass-produced Kalashnikovs.
Yeah, either Soviet or Chinese. Yeah.
Either Soviet or Chinese, but they apparently
Make their
pretty
own.
much work just as well,
Interesting.
which is
That'd
fun.
be like a cool collector's item if you're a collector.
Definitely. And then more real-world gun trivia. Leia's sporting blaster, which she uses before getting stunned by the stormtroopers aboard the Tantive 4, the blockade runner.
Yeah.
That was based on the Soviet-made Margolin 22 target pistol. So it was very much sort of even in the lore, it's considered a sporting pistol, something that's used by like sort of dandy fops to shoot clay pigeons or something. And that's kind of what the actual gun that inspired it is.
Yeah.
And the reason they gave it to Leia as opposed to like something that was based on a Mauser, like what Han and Imperial officers had, is apparently Carrie Fisher's hands were too tiny. It made the blasters look too big. So they're like, we got to find
hands
something.
are not tiny. Okay. They're not tiny at all.
Yeah, a lot of the I think all the Star Wars firearms are essentially
World War
repurposed,
II.
remodeled World War II weapons. And one thing I've always found interesting,
The E11 is that a Tommy gun kind of?
I haven't looked into each and every one, and I'm not really familiar.
Because it's got like sort of that side loading magazine.
Yeah.
Like some
stock piece.
old versions of the Tommy gun had.
Yeah, I don't think it's a Tommy. I think it's actually a German made weapon, but you can look into that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, with all the other German 1940s. Anyways, the one interesting thing that I find odd with some of their guns, you have things like guns based on the MG 42 or I think 34. I can't remember which one they actually use in Star Wars. But sometimes it's used as a sniper rifle, and sometimes I like to think of it as a machine gun because that's what it was in real life. And it's always strange how they like take what would
like
be a
some
machine
kind
gun.
of LMG in it or something.
Yeah. So, but in Star Wars, typically you see it used as a sniper rifle.
Okay.
So like in my mind, I'm always kind of like, what is a gun supposed to be until you see it in universe and how it actually functions?
Yeah.
It's kind of strange. And yeah, there's lots of interesting ways that they modify real world guns to be Star Warsy.
Also on the energy weapons topic, it always sort of bothered me about lightsabers that it was like this continuous blade but it's clearly energy, but it only extends out and doesn't keep going. But then I sort of learned in this, which is one of those things where I kind of figured it must be the case, but there's sort of a force field, a containment field around the plasma blade of the lightsaber that keeps it from just extending off into space,
infinity,
like a regular laser gun. Yeah. So that was interesting. And also it's a very green technology in terms of energy storage because it circulates the plasma back into the power cell. And I couldn't find anywhere that outright said this in the lore on lightsabers, but I think that basically would mean that you'd never have to charge a lightsaber. They could just work in perpetuity. And I think this is something we've talked about before. It's like you never see that in no video games. That's a thing, right? Where you have to like recharge ammo, which
I think Dark Forces, the one where you play as Kyle Katarn. It's been a while.
Maybe in the first one, but not in the second two, because I played the second two
recently.
Fairly recently.
Yeah,
I
do
played them a
Reloads.
lot. I played 2 and 3.
The early renditions of the lightsaber were like connected to power packs.
Yeah, the proto saber.
Yeah.
I like the beam tube also as the it's essentially the device from Ghostbusters. That was like the original blasters. That would have been great if stormtroopers all had the plasma packs or the proton packs from Ghostbusters on them. That would have been hilarious.
Just as a quick fact check before we get angry emails, the Stormtrooper blasters based off of a British submachine gun.
Oh, okay.
Sterling. Just
The Sterling.
Just before we get the angry emails.
Quite
just to
right.
cut that
Quite
off.
right. So hyperspace. It's interesting that hyperspace is like this parallel dimension, and I imagine there's all sorts of commonalities with the warp from Warhammer 40K, but it's sort of like the negative space of our universe, if you will. It's like the photo negative. So it's like all the places where we have mass. In the hyperspace version, you just have like mass shadows, right? Which don't really behave quite the same as mass. Although if you get too close to them, you can get pulled out of hyperspace.
Yeah, and that's like gravity wells and stuff.
Yeah.
They can, if you get too close to a star or a planet, it can pull you out of hyperspace, or they can even use it as weaponized technology. Like the Empire had gravity wells on a specific star.
I was going to say, Revan actually ended the Mandalorian Wars by deploying the mass shadow generator, right?
Yeah.
So it's obviously when you bring the mass shadows into real space, it's like incredibly destructive.
Yeah.
Because that like basically Death Starred an entire planet, and like all the forces that were orbiting it having a battle at Malachor 5.
Yeah.
So another thing about hyperspace is, so they don't really get around, they sort of do a little hand wavy. So apparently when you jump to hyperspace, it's right at the point when you break the light speed barrier is sort of the jumping off point into hyperspace. But then I think the reason you can break the hyperspace barrier is because you've created these ripples in space-time that you're sort of surfing on.
Yeah, that was kind of more my interpretation.
Because you can't break the light speed barrier, right? That's
Yeah.
as Tyrion told us from the theory of universal formation or
Now
whatever
maybe
it was.
now, okay, just as an aside, maybe the Disney canon is using that as an explanation in The Last Jedi for when they
Do the hyperspace run.
hyperspace run into a ship, when technically if you're going into hyperspace you shouldn't be able to like
Interact with.
pierce through objects that way.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. I don't,
But if you do light speed before you jump into hyperspace,
Yeah.
then
That is actually one of the explanations that they use.
is it?
Yeah, is that
Okay.
you accelerate just before the point of.
Of course that's
but
not
that's
the
only the
point.
explanation after everybody got mad at them on
Yes,
Twitter.
and it's only like I'm pretty sure it doesn't appear in any official publication. I think it's just like a fan, which honestly I think I will forgive it if that's the case because I think that's kind of a cool explanation. But
So I'm going to do a thing. There is a theoretical solution to the speed of light barrier in our universe. And over the summer, there was actually a physicist who wrote a paper on it. And I'm really bad at physics. It's not really an area I know much about. But according to people who know something about physics, like this paper was very well received in the theoretical physics community. And they're like, yeah, this
sounds legit.
if you had like an absolutely insane amount of energy, yes, you could possibly do this. And so it's a theoretical construct called an Alcubierre drive that would allow you to bypass the speed of light. So I'm just going to briefly read a Wikipedia description and we'll see if it makes sense to us or not. So the Alcubierre drive is a speculative idea based on a solution of Einstein's field equations in general relativity, as proposed by theoretical physicist Miguel Alcubierre. That's a different guy than the one who wrote the recent paper. I forget his name. By which a spacecraft could achieve apparent faster than light travel if a configurable energy density field lower than that of a vacuum, that is, negative mass, could be created. Rather than exceeding the speed of light within a local reference frame, a spacecraft would traverse distances by contracting space in front of it and expanding space behind it, resulting in effective faster than light travel. Objects cannot accelerate to the speed of light within normal space-time. Instead, the Alcubierre drive shifts space around an object so that the object would arrive at its destination faster than light would in normal space without breaking any physical laws. Does that make sense? I think that sort of is the idea.
I'm not a physicist either, but I swear I've heard that theory before.
This is actually pretty much line and verse how faster than light travel works in the Dune universe.
Okay, and I'm not familiar with Star Trek either, but that might also be.
I think it's a very similar.
And I think
speed.
even Futurama might
That's what
play
warp
on that
speed.
as well, if I'm not mistaken. But I swear I've heard that almost exact explanation of like how it
Yeah.
contracts space in front and expands space behind.
But in Star Wars, they just get around it by the normal laws of physics just don't apply. The light speed barrier just doesn't apply. You can just accelerate infinitely.
Yeah.
I think it's because hyperspace is sort of that negative image.
Yeah,
So
you can do what you want in a world.
so
where
like
you write the
thermodynamics is essentially reversed, right?
rules. Yeah. So
Something like that.
So what about I wonder if Star Wars, I guess maybe the Qua technology of their Stargates, Infinity Gates. Because I know, like, okay, in like sort of the UFO community, there's like
And the
reputable-
TV show Stargate.
yeah, and no, in the UFO community, there's like the concept of like that they believe how UFOs can travel so far so fast is like they sort of like bend space, and that's kind of how they can go such massive distances, right? I wonder if like there's that concept for faster than light travel in Star Wars or in any other science fiction.
Yeah, I think Dune
Is that like a similar idea?
Yeah, it's very much the same idea as the what are they called? Navigators. These spice-addled mutant humans use like psychic powers to sort of essentially, I think it might even be sort of telekinetically or magically bend space-time around their ships so that they can bypass the speed of light barrier.
Yeah.
Unlike 40K, where you just travel straight through hell. But whatever floats your boat, whatever.
But that's funner anyway.
Fast travels your starship.
I do love warp stories in the 40K universe. They're always a lot of fun.
Lots of room to play with.
So there's also another like theoretical construct I wanted to talk about, since this is we were talking about different ages of technology and stuff. And in science fiction, there's this, or not even science fiction, just like futurism, I guess, this concept of analysis called Kardashev levels. So it was made by this Russian scholar named something Kardashev.
We can only assume.
Yeah, and he had like three level Kardashev levels. So the first Kardashev level, describing technology, is close to the level presently attained on Earth, with energy consumption at 4 × 10 to the power 19 ergs per second. So currently,
that math adds up.
Yeah, Christian just checked it. Our astromech droid. Currently, the civilization of Type 1 is usually defined as one that can harness all the energy that falls on a planet from its parent star. So, I mean, we're still quite a bit away,
even from the lowest level,
from the first Kardashev level. But this is basically where your utopian style science fiction societies would start, is like you got to hit that Kardashev level before you can have all the stuff that we see in Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever.
It'd basically be unlimited energy, which means post scarcity, pretty much.
Exactly.
And everything that comes with it.
Yeah.
And then a Type 2 civilization, and this is something like you very rarely see. You see a lot of societies, science fiction cultures and stuff that are at that level, like, but you don't really see the other two Kardashev levels. So Type 2 is a civilization capable of harnessing the energy radiated, all of the energy radiated by its star. For example, the stage of a successful construction of a Dyson sphere. So this is like a giant metal, like energy collection thing that you build around a star. Yeah. So it's not just all the solar energy that comes on the planet, but it's all the energy of your star you're capable of harnessing. So that would be a post scarcity society.
Halo actually has the Forerunners are able to. They have a Dyson sphere with a star in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so then a Type 3, I'm guessing you can maybe see where this is going, is then you can harness all the energy output of an entire galaxy.
What could you even possibly need that much energy for?
I mean, I guess for whatever the Celestials were doing, maybe they were
moving stars
sort of around that age.
Maybe they were propelling the galaxy in a certain direction.
Maybe they were warring galaxies against each other, smashing them into each other.
Yeah, making bigger galaxies.
And so then we have our... It's cool how the Empire was so into anthropology. I keep finding this again and again in many different episodes, imperial anthropologists being referenced. And so they came up with this age scheme, much like we have, like our Bronze Age, Iron Age, what have you.
Yeah.
And so in human cultures, it doesn't necessarily progress all that in all that linear a fashion. And there are a lot of things, for example, the Mayans and Aztecs, basically, I think with the exception of gold, they did not like use a whole lot of metal whatsoever. It was like all obsidian and wood, and that's pretty much what they used to build their entire society. And also ancient Egypt, very well known for being, obviously huge construction projects and stuff, but they basically didn't use iron at all. They had copper, and that was pretty much the best metal that they had. I recently actually...
Are you sure they didn't have alien tech? Can you definitively say they didn't have anti-gravity laser beams?
They also had infinity gates underneath the pyramids. The pyramids, by the way, you only see half of it. The other half goes the other direction.
It's a Thor-yor.
Upside down.
Yeah,
it's
Thor-yor,
it's a giant Thor-yor, in case you didn't know. I recently actually found out that in a few Egyptian burial tombs, they use meteoric iron to make like these ceremonial knives, and that's pretty much some of the oldest
Iron technology.
iron that we found it comes from meteoric iron, which is a very interesting thing.
That is interesting.
And they of course figured that it came from the god. They thought that iron was like frozen lightning.
Okay.
Was sort
Probably
of-
because it was so strong compared to copper.
And then maybe they also actually like saw an impact event,
Right.
or like a big flash in the sky.
I kind of wonder if that's how they found it. They saw it and then went to the
site and they're
yeah.
like, what is this? That's kind of crazy, actually.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a very.
It's obviously aliens, though.
Yeah, it's
we
clearly
all
aliens.
know that.
We all know it.
How did the pyramids get built?
How
There's no other explanation.
How did they move those stones? How did they move them? And so, guys, got anything else?
No, cool episode.
Cool episode.
The technology is always interesting. Like, I always find more like what inspired them to write about that technology, or imagine that technology. So it's like interesting to hear the guns that inspired certain weapons in Star Wars. So
one thing I find interesting is I brought this up on another episode more from the aesthetic perspective, but the technological development perspective in Star Wars. You have these massive time scales with very little advancement. Like you could get thrown into Knights of the Old Republic or get thrown into like post-Empire eras, and the technology seems to be pretty consistent, which I find a little bit strange. It's always kind of irked me a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's why I do like the old Sith War stuff, because it's so divergent from, but you recognize it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
If someone showed you it without context, you probably wouldn't even know it was a Star Wars story.
Yeah.
They dress so different. Their buildings look so different. The ships they use look old. They look like almost they have like masts and ropes and things. They give me a very strong like Age of Sail.
Tales of the Jedi has a lot of that kind of stuff. It's very like Grecian.
It's always kind of interesting too when you run into species that are like Stone Age, like the Ewoks, or even like in Splinter of the Mind's Eye. I can't remember the species.
The Coway.
Yeah, the Coway.
Yeah.
That live underground. There's lots of diversity of like time scales of where species are at. So
Also keep in mind, I mean, like look at our own history, right? Until like the 1600s, like the previous 10,000 years were all
pretty static.
Pretty
not
very
slow.
Not that much change.
Like a bronze sword and an iron sword. They're leagues apart, but they're also still both swords versus nuclear bombs.
And it also took like 5,000 years to get from a bronze to an iron sword, right? Whereas it's only very recently that technology changes at a very quick pace.
Yeah.
And actually, if you, we talked earlier in the episode about the Aculian and the Olduan stone tools. And if you look in the paleontological record, you find these things are there in pretty much the exact same form for like tens of thousands of years before they change at all, right? And then once they do start changing, then it starts to speed up. But again, compared to what we're used to with technology at a very glacial pace, like once you develop the Aculian hand axe, it's still like another 10,000 years or something before the first agriculture.
Yeah. But then you also have in Star Wars context all these other species intermingling, which we don't have in real life to reference either, right? So what happens if someone else advances to the point of starship technology? What does that mean for all the Stone Age cultures, right?
Yeah, I think what we see in Star Wars is it's pretty clear that if you're sentient, you can basically figure out any technology.
And how to work. And that's why it's so as much as there is every kind of stage out there, I'd say it's rarer for like a Stone Age technology or primitive technology. You see a lot of species able to travel. It's pretty universal, traveling at galactic scales and blaster technology and lasers and
And the Ewoks Stone Age people managed to
take out the Empire.
Take out a space age army. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. It's because of hubris.
The climax of every Greek tragedy.
Yep.
All right. You guys got anything else?
No. Make sure to check us out on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
And yeah, we're happy to hear any of your thoughts on this episode or any other episode. Hit us up with your thoughts and opinions or criticisms. Happy to read them on air.
May the forks be with you.
Thanks for flying with us. We are interested to hear from you. You can reach us at starlorspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts, comments, or corrections. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating, review, and subscribe. You can also help us out through our Patreon at the Star Lords Podcast. Find us on Instagram, the Star Lords Podcast, on Facebook at the Star Lords Podcast, on Twitter at the Star Lords Podcast, and on YouTube, Star Lords Podcast. We'll catch you next time.